Hello YouTube chess lovers and my friends, this is Gunjan here. Welcome to the last and the final part of my chess repertoire against e4. In this section we are going to see how to deal the sidelines against the move knight to c6, and you can see there are plenty. Now there are few points I like to mention before we go and look at them. The first most obvious point is this sidelines will be played by an opponent which is probably the weaker than you, or a person who doesn't know how to react against Nc6 move. The second most important point is against the mainline stuff which start with the move d4 or knight to f3, white obtain a slight advantage and black needs to first of all equalize and then look forward for the initiative. Well, here when your opponent plays the sideline moves, black can equalize very easily, and later stage you can always look forward for getting advantage in the middle game. And the third and the final important point I like to mention is it's very hard to give you exact move order. So what I'm going to do in this section is I'm going to show you ideas which black can look out and the themes. So you can work on this and you will obtain a good advantage straight away in the opening. So considering all this, let's get started. Now specifically in this video I'm going to concentrate only moves on bishop to c4 and bishop to b5. So first of all we are going to see the move bishop to c4. Against bishop to c4, the first move we are going to play is knight to f6, hitting the e4 pawn. So now there are two replies is white can play. There will be a transposition, so it doesn't matter. Let's say white here continue with the move knight to c3. And what white is hoping is black is playing the move e5. So now white can relax and become confident because black enter into his familiar territory. But we are not going to do that. What we are going to do is instead of the move e5, we are going to play the move e6. And we are going to play the quick d5. And this is, you should always remember in the bishop to c4 line. Never play e5, play e6 and go for the quick d5 with already a slight advantageous position. I'll show you two games in this line. In the first game my opponent played the move d3 and I replied with the move d5. Now there are two obvious replies from the white. The first obvious reply is e captures d5, and after e captures d5 white plays the obvious looking move bishop to b3. Here I propose that black should play the move bishop to b4 and pinning that knight. So now black has created the first threat of pushing the d4 pawn. In this game my opponent responded with the move bishop to d2. I castle on the king side, so now I'm threatening the move rook to e8. So my opponent blocked the e file with the move knight g to e2. I played rook to e8 anyways, and now he castled on the king side. It's time to develop my last minor piece, so I played bishop to g4. With this move I created second threat, that is I want to capture the c3 knight and then capturing the e2 knight. So white needs to be very careful. My opponent responded with the move f3, getting out of the pin and hitting the bishop. Here I give him this check, and after king to h1 I played the move bishop to e6. My opponent responded with the move knight to f4, which is very natural because he wants to get that bishop pair. But as soon as that knight has been moved, I played the move knight to d4. We'll see what is the idea behind knight to d4. My opponent captured the bishop, I captured with the rook, and now he played the move rook to e1. And now comes the whole idea of the e6 move. What I have done is, first of all I capture that rook, and when white recapture I played the move c6, and what it does is it completely shut down this bishop and the knight, and this is more or less the theme of this e6 move. What you need to do is on the right time you need to move that knight out and then completely blockade this bishop, this pawn shell. So it will be very hard for the white to activate this bishop. So it will take a long time, and in the meantime you can activate your major piece and develop an attack. So we'll see how I achieve in this game. After realizing what happens to his bishop, my opponent responded with the move knight to a4. So he wants to probably now take the bishop and play the move c3. I played the move bishop to d6, and my opponent responded with the move bishop to f2. I responded with the move knight to e6, so I'm giving no chance to him to free up his bishop. Here my opponent responded with the move queen to e2. I played the move b5, so drive his knight back to the c3, and now another attacking move a4. More space on the queen side. My opponent has to forcefully play the move a3, so a4 comes anyways, bishop drop backs to the a2, and now comes queen to a5. So I'm just toying with my opponent. My opponent responded with the move bishop to e1, and I played the move queen to c7. So now I'm attacking the h2, which my opponent defended with the move h3, but h3 created a hole on the g3, which I immediately exploited with the move knight to h5. Right now knight to g3 is not a big threat, but sooner or later I'm going to create some tactics based on that square. Here my opponent played the move knight to d1, so he was probably thinking of the move c4 and liberate that bishop, but it's too little too late, because after the move knight to d4 my opponent realized that he is in a big danger. I think he was in the time trouble at this point, and he played the disastrous move, that is queen to f2. And now I give you a few seconds. Can you find the right continuation which more or less finished the white off? I hope you find this move, that is knight to g3 check, and after king to g1 this amazing move knight to e2, which is almost a checkmate, except that white needs to give up the queen. And look at that pathetic bishop, which was in the prison by this amazing pawn chain. So this is the main concept in the bishop to c4 line. What black wants to do is to play the move e6 and quick d5, gaining advantage quickly in the opening. Now at this point the second move white can try is bishop to b5. Against this I'm recommending that you should play the move bishop to d7, and here my opponent, which was a higher rated one, he played the move knight to f3. I responded with the move a6, so clarification of the pin. My opponent responded with the move bishop captures c6, and after I recaptured he played the move knight to e5. So he just want to simplify the whole position. Here I responded with the move queen to d6. My opponent captured the bishop. I recapture with the queen, and now he played the move queen to f3. So he's pressurizing the d5 pawn. I simply refute everything with the move bishop to b4. So now there's a double pin on the knight. Here white cannot capture the d5 pawn. If he would have captured the d5 pawn, then after bishop to c3 white cannot capture the piece, because at the end white will lose a rook. So white has to play moves such as king to f1. But after this black can simply capture the d5 pawn with the knight, and after b captures c3 and queen captures c3 there is an attack on the rook. So rook has to move, and black will capture the c2 pawn, once again attacking the rook. And after rook to a1 there is no need to go further. You can already see black has a huge advantage. So that's why at this point my opponent responded with the move bishop to d2. But after this the task become very easy for me. So what I did is, first of all, capture the knight, and when white recaptured with the bishop I captured the pawn. Of course black is not going to be a pawn up, because after few transactions white will regain the pawn back via move bishop captures g7. But what it does is it will give an initiative to the black. Here I responded with the move rook to g8, and after bishop to e5 I castle on the queen side. So you can easily see black is getting a huge initiative. Here my opponent responded with the move castling on the king side, and I responded with the move f5. The simple reason is I want to free up my queen, which was tied up to defend that knight. My opponent responded with the move bishop to g3, and I start my kingside attack with the move h5. My opponent responded with the move rook to d1, so he wants to swap up the rooks. But this move turns out as a blunder, because now I capture the rook, and in order to save the c2 pawn my opponent has to recapture with the queen, which allow me to walk some good tactics. Now before we look at them, I want you to pause the video and find out the winning continuation for the black. I hope you find this move, that is h4. Now it doesn't matter bishop capture the pawn or move somewhere. For example, in this game my opponent captured the pawn, but after this, can you see it? Yep, it's knight to c3. Not only black is threatening to checkmate white on the g2, but black is also attacking the queen, and white cannot parry both of them. So my opponent at this point resigned. So with these two model games, you can have a good idea how to play against the move bishop to c4. It's time to look at the next move, that is bishop to b5. Bishop to b5 has been tried not only by the beginners but even the higher ranked players. Black should be jolly delighted because the line against this will be a very simple and it will give you a great advantage. Here black should immediately hit this bishop with the move a6, and white has two choices. If white plays the normal move, that is bishop to a4, then black can immediately play the move b5, and after the move bishop to b3. Can you guess it? Yep, it's the same concept. What we are going to do is, first of all, hit the e4 pawn with the move knight to f6, and whether white plays the move d3 or knight to c3, let's say in this game my opponent responded with the move d3. Now comes the similar formation which we already look at in the bishop to c4 line, and that start with the move e6. At this point my opponent responded with the move knight to c3. There is no prize for guessing. You can already see the d5 is coming. After e captures d5 and e captures d5, once again you can see what kind of theme is cropping up. Seeing this danger, my opponent responded with the move bishop to b5. So his idea is very simple. He wants to capture the knight and then capture the d5 pawn. Well, I responded with the move bishop to b5, setting up the tactics. He fall for it. I can't say it's fall for it, but it's just a natural move. So my opponent responded with the move bishop captures knight, and after queen captures, he grabbed the d5 pawn. And in fact he has to, because if he played a passive move such as knight g to e2, then after d4 white will lose a piece, because a3 counter doesn't create any threat. Black can simply drop the bishop back to the a5, and now that knight is a goner. So that's why my opponent has to forcefully capture this d5 pawn, and after this I capture the knight. My opponent recaptured the bishop, and now I capture the c3 pawn. So now not only I'm saving my c6 knight, but I'm preventing white to play the move queen to d2. My opponent has to obviously play moves such as king to f1, and after this I just castle on the king side. He continued with the move knight to e2, hitting the queen. I place my queen on the c5 square, hitting the bishop. So he played bishop to f3, and I responded with the move rook to e8. My opponent decided to give his king some air, so he played the move g3, but after bishop check, he decided to block the check with the bishop. I exchanged the bishops and played the move knight to e5. At this point white needs to be very careful, and I have seen many games where my opponent rushed to this move, that is rook to e1. So what white wants to do is get the rook out of the jail and then place the king back to the g1. But in this position it will be too dangerous, because now black can finish up the white. I give you a few seconds. Can you find a continuation which will more or less win the game? Okay, I hope you find this continuation. Let's start with the move queen to c6 check. Now king to h3 will be very dangerous, and you can't think of the move king to g1. So the only move left is king to f1. So my opponent's idea is to, if I'm giving the check, then he can block the check with the knight. But now comes the second aggressive move, that is knight to g4. So now the planning is very simple. Once again the queen check, but this time if white defends with the knight, then knight to h2 will be actually a checkmate. So my opponent has to forcefully play the move king to g1. And now come the final blow, which is queen to f3. So now I'm once again threatening the move such as queen captures f2 and queen captures h2 checkmate. So my opponent has to save the mate with the only move, that is rook to f1, but this move allow me to capture the whole piece, that is rook captures e2. So not only black has captured a piece, but there is an attack to boot. And after this move, you can guess my opponent immediately resigned. So I hope this game will give you enough information how you should respond against the move bishop to e4. You can always go for the quick b5 and then e6 and d5. And if your opponent try to do some cheap tactics with the move bishop to g5, from this game you have the enough idea how to handle those tactics. After the move a6, white can go for the second line, that is bishop captures c6, and when black recapture with the b pawn, white grab the center with the move d4. Against this, I'm recommending that you should immediately hit back in the center with the move d5, and there are two ways white can respond it. In the first game, my opponent responded with the move knight to c3. After this, I responded with the move e6, and now here is the plan. What black is aiming for is destroying the white center with two c pawns. So you have a structure like French or Caro-Kann, but it's a superior one because white doesn't have the light square bishop to attack black on the king side. Let's see how this all work out in the practical game. Here my opponent responded with the move knight to f3. I responded with the move knight to f6, and he responded with the move bishop to g5. So creating a pin, I break the pin with the move bishop to e7, and now this sort of moves which you're always going to expect, that is the move e5. And this is actually we want, because now we are going to play the move knight to d7. My opponent captured this bishop, I recapture with the queen, and he castle on the king side, and the move which was waiting for a while, yup, it's a c5, destroying the white center. Seeing no good way to defend the d4 pawn, my opponent decided to capture the c5 pawn. I recapture with the knight, and now he plays the move queen to e2. I castle on the king side, and he responded with the move rook to d1. So in a way, white is playing just initial moves, but white is planless in this kind of scenario, and that is the big advantage black is getting. Black plan is very simple. What black wants to do is to expand on the queen side and attack white there. After queen to e2, I responded with the move bishop to b7. My opponent responded with the move b4. I drop my knight back to the d7, and this is what happened. When you are planless, this kind of errors will occur. And my opponent played the move b5, which turns out as a big mistake. Before we go and look what mistake my opponent has done, I want you to pause the video and find out why this move is wrong. Okay, I hope you find this solution, that is capturing the pawn. Now it doesn't matter how white recaptured. In the game, my opponent responded with the move knight captures b5, but after the move c6, the game is over. Let's see what happened if white plays the move knight to d6. Well, it's very simple. Black will skewer the queen and the rook, and black emerge with an exchange up. In the game, my opponent decided to play the move knight to d4, but our tactics will remain as it is because I played the move bishop to a6. My opponent's idea was to capture the c6 pawn and counterattack the black queen, but after queen to c5, the threat remained as it is. So white is forced to move the queen. White played the move queen to e3, but after queen captures knight, black is clearly in the driving seat with a piece up situation. So that is about knight to c3. At this position, instead of knight to c3, it is possible that your opponent can play the move immediate e5. Against this, you can use the similar setup which I have shown in my previous game. But if you are a very ambitious player, you can try this aggressive move, that is bishop to f5. However, personally this is bit risky, so if you are trying it, just try it against a low rated player. Bishop to f5 has a very simple idea. What black wants to do is, let's say after the move knight to f3, black will play the move e6, and you can see that bishop is outside the pawn chain, so it's an active piece rather than sitting on the c8. In this game my opponent responded with the move castle, and I responded with the move c5. So immediate c5 in this game. My opponent responded with the move c3. So now there is a threat of queen to a4 check, and this is a drawback of this bishop to f5 line. However, you will see in this game I can easily deal with this. So I played the move queen to d7. My opponent responded with the move bishop to e3. I captured the pawn, he recaptured, and I played the move knight to e7. My opponent developed his last minor piece with the move knight to c3, and I played the move bishop to g6. So what I want to do is to play the move knight to f5, develop a bishop, and then castle on the king side. Here my opponent responded with the move knight to a4. So his idea is to plonk the knight on the c5. I invite him to do that, so I played the move knight to f5, and he attacked my queen with the move knight to c5. Such a nonsense should be immediately removed, so I capture the knight, and after white recapture, I capture the bishop. When white captured back the piece, you can already see positionally it's a winning game for the black, because white pawns are all over the place, and game continuation will show you how to execute such a plan. So here I first of all hit the b2 pawn with the move rook to b8. My opponent responded with the move b3, and I hit this loose c5 pawn with the move rook to b5. My opponent defended with the move queen to d4. So the queen is acting like a sophisticated pawn. I castle on the king side. My opponent responded with the move e4, so protecting the c5 pawn. I responded with the move rook to b8. So you can see how easy it is for black to place such a position, where it's very difficult for white to, hold on to this position and defending everything. My opponent responded with the move a3, and now comes the a4. And white will love to play the move rook to b1, but right now that bishop is not allowing to do that, and that means that b4 pawn will be definitely gone. After a long thinking, my opponent played the move knight to e4, but I preserve my bishop with the move bishop to e4, and he comes back with his knight. So you can already see he's a planless. I capture the pawn, white recapture, and now I clear any threats of white with the move h6. My opponent thought that I give him time to defend the b4 pawn, so he played the move rook to a4. But after one move bishop to c2, he realized that he cannot save the b4 pawn. After the game continuation rook to a2, I captured the b pawn with the attack on the queen. My opponent played the move queen to c3, but that allowed me to activate my piece more freely with the move rook to c4. Desperate for counterplay, my opponent responded with the move queen to a5, and I responded with the move bishop to e4. So once again centralizing the bishop, which is always going to be useful. That piece is so strong that my opponent decided to eliminate that piece with the move knight to d2. I responded with the move rook to b4, and now he removed that bishop with the move knight captures. I recapture with the rook. My opponent decided to save the e3 pawn with the move rook to a3. I can eat that e pawn anytime, so I activate my queen with the move queen to e7, and after rook to a1, I activate my final piece with the move rook to b2. And look at the pathetic position of white. White three major pieces are on the a file, but I don't understand what is trying to do with those. Meanwhile, black has activated both his rook, and queen is also coming on the king side, and it's a disastrous position for white. And still my opponent go for it. So he played the queen to a8 check. I played king to h7, and now he played rook to a2. So he wants to eliminate that active rook. After a few calculations, I capture that rook, and when white recapture with the rook, I simply grab the c4 pawn, and at this point you can understand the reaction of my opponent. Two hopeless pawns in the center with an unsafe king, my opponent has given up at this point. So with this game I have shown you two ideas, one with the bishop outside the pawn chain and the second one without it, and in both the condition what black is aiming for is a French or the Caro-Kann structure with a good hit in the center with the move c5. Well, thank you for watching this lecture. Feel free to comment and like it, and I'll meet you in my next lecture very soon. Bye.